Да не, ему утесу хана.
Russians are struggling on the left bank of Kherson, and it's no coincidence that Russian government outlets reported about the withdrawing of Russians' forces, then reiterated the information. On the left bank, Russians are being targeted left and right. Here, in Malokakovka, a site with Russian equipment was found and hit.
Да не, ему утесу хана.
And this makes me angry. A Russian person who lives in the United States says he supports Putin and complains that it's impossible to drive drunk in the US and there's no freedom of speech. However, he prefers to love his sacred motherland from another continent and does not want to return to Russia. Deport him back to Putin.
Что вам больше всего нравится в этой стране?
Абсолютно ничего не нравится.
Что-то не та Америка, когда мы приехали. Это уже больше Советский Союз. Нет свободы слова. Раньше можно было в пьяном виде ездить, тебе полицейский останавливал, спрашивал, да едешь ли ты дома? Говоришь, да, доеду. Говорит, ну езжай только осторожно. А сейчас ты получаешь штраф, у тебя отбирают права, у тебя отбирают машину.
Какой совет вы дадите тем, кто едет в эту страну?
Пусть не подумают лишний раз. Не подарок Америки. Я лично очень за Путина, считаю, что все, что он делает, это очень правильно. Я думаю, что в России будет лучше, если они там останутся.
Через 10 лет в этой стране никто не будет говорить по-английски.
Что хорошего делает Путин?
То, что он говорит, вот когда он пресс-конференции, или он выступает цифрами, прямо наизусть все помнит, или послушать американского президента, или послушать Путина, это далеко не одно и то же. Вот поэтому. Видно, что человек участвует во всех делах.
Не думаете переехать в Россию?
Знаете, если бы я был помоложе, я бы задумался, но мне уже немножко поздновато.
Будем страдать здесь, так сказать.
Russian instructor of Storm Z penal units explains the impact that Ukrainian cluster munitions are having on the Russian infantry, not only killing and wounding them, but also disrupting logistics of evacuation and overfilling the hospitals. He says that wounded Russian servicemen are returned to battle with shrapnel still stuck in their bodies. Here we have a certain Wunderwaffe, which, despite all its effectiveness, does not improve the situation at the front due to its limited or even targeted use. Let's say we have a wonderful Smerch system, which in fact does not affect the general state of affairs at the front. These MLRs deliver targeted strikes, but they are simply not enough to provide a full barrage of fire for the advancing infantry. It needs to be scaled up, then there will be a really tangible effect on the ground, and not just individual use cases suitable for plots of TV programs. And there also are military technological methods that are not only used with a high degree of efficiency, but are also presented in commercial quantities, as a result of which the contours of direct combat operations, rear infrastructure, and military logistics literally break down. Here, in terms of the specific means of destruction available to the enemy, I would highlight 3 elements that radically complicate the situation: HIMARS, kamikaze drones, and the cluster shells. It is cluster shells that are now knocking out a huge mass of our infantry with the layering of a number of negative factors. The infantry suffers heavy excess losses directly on the battlefield, as a result of which the execution of combat missions is disrupted. And in addition to this, there is an overstrain of evacuation logistics and an overload of the military medical infrastructure. The rapid depletion of infantry units, coupled with the overload of hospitals, leads to the fact that people are massively returned to the battle, primarily undertreated, and often with small damaging elements in the soft tissues not removed. In addition, as I said above, cluster shells have a very favorable ratio of the quantity used to the quality of fire damage inflicted on infantry. The general situation at the front, of course, consists of a whole complex of various factors, but weapons like these also have a significant impact on it. It would seem logical to ask the question, well, where is the game change? After all, there are no radical shifts in the front line, much less breakthroughs from the enemy. However, there aren't any on our side either. And there is a price. Very high and sad, exhausting and bleeding the enemy on the defensive, and then collapsing the front with powerful counterattacks would be an excellent plan if implemented. But in fact, along the way, we ourselves were pretty exhausted and bled dry. Here is a game change in which cluster shells have already played and continue to play their role. Russian propagandist Simonian says that if Russia hasn't attacked Ukraine, the situation in Russia would be the same as in Gaza. Then she praises Russian humanism. The day Simonian arrives to The Hague for her trial will be a happy day for many people all over the world.
Не было бы еды, и ничего бы это никого не смутило. И мы должны понимать, что это не происходит только потому, что мы оказались сильнее. И мы этого не допустили. Мы не допустили разрушить нашу экономику. В очередной раз скажу спасибо Мишустину, нашему премьер-министру, и всем, кто с ним работает. Мы не позволили разрушить нашу армию, воюя со всем НАТО, на секундочку, а ни с какой, ни с Украиной. Мы не позволили ее не то что разрушить, мы сделали ее сильнее. И тоже нужно сказать огромное спасибо тем, кто за это отвечает. И отдельное спасибо я хочу сказать нашему верховному главнокомандующему за то, что он не поддался на уговоры многих, в том числе народные такие крики из народа. Ну что же мы их не бомбим, ну что же мы вот не расфигачим там все. И сохранил сдержанность и человечность. И не дал никому из нас превратиться в зверей. Что мы все-таки не такие. Это круто, на самом деле. Наблюдая, как весь мир скатывается в зверинец и в эти клетки зверинца, а мы остаемся такими же, каким был Трифон Лукинович в 1945 году. Они при этом стремятся нас расчеловечить.
Breaking. The U.S. is targeting the Dark Fleet. This is big news. Reuters reports this evening that the U.S. Treasury Department has sent notices to ship management companies requesting information about 100 vessels it suspects of violating Western sanctions on Russian oil, according to a source who has seen the documents. At last there is action against the Dark Fleet and Grey Fleet. The group of 7 rich countries, the European Union and Australia, imposed the $60 per barrel cap last December on seaborne exports of Russian crude to punish Moscow for its war on Ukraine. It bans Western companies from providing services such as transportation, insurance, and financing for the oil sold above the cap. The price cap has caused a shift in global markets as China and India purchase Russian oil, much of which had traditionally gone to Europe and other markets. A rally in global oil prices this year has meant much of Russian oil has traded above the cap. In October 2023, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on 2 companies shipping Russian oil, in its first enforcement of measures designed to choke off revenues to the Kremlin as continues its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. Treasury Department said the 2 companies based in the United Arab Emirates and Turkey had used U.S.-based shipping services while carrying Russian crude bought at a price greater than $60 per barrel, violating the oil price cap G7 countries imposed on Moscow last year. The enforcement measures come amid G7 countries' broader effort to restrict the flow of petrodollars to Russian President Vladimir Putin's war chest. The group issued a statement on Thursday outlining the risks of violating the price cap rules. A senior Treasury official said the Kremlin's oil tax revenue was down 45% from January to August this year, compared with the same months in 2022. But Moscow has increasingly dodged sanctions on most of its oil exports, with almost 3/4 of Russian crude traveling without Western insurance in August. U.S. officials have said the cap has imposed extra costs on Russia for a ghost fleet of aging tankers, longer voyages, and reliance on non-Western maritime services that have cut into the revenues it can spend on the war. The notices, sent by the Office of Foreign Assets Control to ship management companies in about 30 countries on Friday, represent the biggest step of its kind by the United States since Washington and its allies imposed the price cap last year, aimed at restricting oil revenues to Moscow as punishment for its invasion of Ukraine, the source said. The requests for information are a routine step in sanctions investigations. Today's action demonstrates our continued commitment to reduce Russia's resources for its war against Ukraine and to enforce the price cap, said U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo. The new sanctions enforcement come as the Joe Biden administration tries to build pressure on the Kremlin for its war in Ukraine and to show support for Kiev after Congress recently omitted more funding for the country in a stopgap spending measure.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week at 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.